The AI revolution is here, and it's transforming influencer marketing in ways we never imagined. In this episode, Jeremy Barnett, CEO of RAD Intel, shares how his company is leveraging AI to empower creators and brands by analyzing audience insights, removing bias from influencer selection, and driving better content decisions.
Well, our mission is to ultimately help brands make better content decisions through understanding who their audience is and the things that they care about today. Well, we work with Fortune 1000 brands like the Hasbros and MGMs and Sweetgreens of the world. I think it's going to continue to shift towards depth of content relationships, depth of influencer relationships, depth of brand partnership relationships.
Okay, so today on the show, I'm joined by Jeremy from RAD Intel. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. So let's just jump straight into it. Can you tell us what is RAD Intel and what is your mission?
Well, our mission is to ultimately help brands make better content decisions through understanding who their audience is and the things that they care about today. And we've discovered that when making content recommendations or influencer or creator recommendations, if you don't have an intimate understanding of who your customer is and what mobilizes them to take action as a direct correlation to the world today, that you're sometimes either making dated recommendations or you're infusing bias into who you should book to do the X, Y, or Z for any campaign. So we've created an artificial intelligence that understands the language of the internet through a very robust API infrastructure. And then we have LLMs that have been developed at the individual platform level, so at all the different data partners that we have, in order to understand who your customer is, what motivates them to take action as it relates to your campaign objective. And by taking the audience insights portion of it first, we're able to make better creator and influencer recommendations and ultimately help you guide the content creation process to produce a better outcome.
That's great. Well, I mean, AI really is on the tip of everyone's tongue at the moment. Who are your primary customers and how do you sort of address their specific needs and challenges?
Well, we work with Fortune 1000 brands like the Hasbros and MGMs and Sweetgreens of the world. And typically, our clients are, comfortable with some sort of an initial budget of $100,000 plus. So that certainly attracts a certain type of customer. And then we also work with a top three global agency holding company by the name of Omnicom and several agencies that are under their umbrella. So there's distinctly different KPIs associated with whether it's a brand direct or we're working with the agency to help procure more business or improve customer value. But at the end of the day, we're ultimately working with customers that either want to identify or validate who their customer is and the relationship between those audience insights and the campaign objective.
Got it. And can you explain like how your language models work and what sets them apart from many of the other businesses that are sort of talking about AI at the moment?
Well, the first thing is it's really important because of the world that we live in. For example, one of our data sources is Reddit. And the idea with Reddit is we are getting a kind of a look under the hood of the way the world feels on any given topic. And that helps us identify not just the conversations that are mobilizing, but it also helps identify the things sometimes you shouldn't do. And both things can be equally important in the context of a creator campaign. So what we've done is we've created these different data feeds that feed into our LLM. So we look at Reddit, we look at X, we look at Google Search, we look at historical content patterns associated with the creators as an aggregate whole. And then we look at all of the different engagement metrics ranging all the way down to the comment, likes, shareability of the content, and then the sentiment associated with those metrics. So we have multiple different places that are coming into sort of like one pool. And the reason why that's important is because we're able to identify a real-time, real world without trying not to sound too jargony, but just understanding the language of the internet as it relates to what's going on right now based off of what your campaign objective is. So before anything happens, we have a good look at who your customers are today and the things that mobilize them to take action. And there's a couple of really interesting things that come from that. Sometimes a brand will be like, great, we know this is true. We already have this information. Thank you very much. So in this context, we've either validated what they already know, which we were worried about that initially, but it turns out you establish a little bit of trust with the customer because they can see that there's something going on here that is at least accurate because they believe it to be accurate based off of their own research. Sometimes you find new audiences and new behaviors within those audiences that need to be surfaced in the form of a marketing campaign. And then sometimes you find things that you thought to be true that simply are not true. I can give you an example with one of our clients, Sweetgreen. One of the initiatives they had for us was they know that they have traction in LA, in California, for example. People are willing to spend $25 for a salad in LA, and people are also willing to spend $25 for a salad in New York. But what about Michigan? What about Texas? What about these flyover states? So the idea was they were launching in these flyover states, and they had all these preconceptions about maybe changing their billing structure. Not a $25 salad, maybe it's a $15 salad, all these different things associated with reducing the cost. And the preconceived notion there was people in those flyover states would not be willing to spend $25 for a salad. And what we found through our initial audience insights and analysis was that the problem wasn't the fact that people were willing to spend $25 for a salad. They actually wanted to. The problem was just good old fashioned. They didn't even know it existed. So it becomes more of an awareness issue at that point. Now you can imagine just that piece of information at the beginning of a program guides the creators that are selected and then also guides the type of content those creators are contracted to make.
Wow, that's fascinating. A great example. I know with AI, one of the challenges can sometimes be the bias. How do you think about the bias in content creation and marketing?
Well, that's a really fun question. Well, for starters, any campaign, you even have bias on whether or not you decide to accept the AI's recommendations. So the goal is to leave the pen in the hand of the marketing practitioner, right? So you're giving this information and you're saying, hey, this is unbiased information. You as the marketing practitioner can accept or decline it. You can say this works or it doesn't work, but you're equipped with better information to ultimately make better decisions. That's the goal. So when you talk about bias, there's all sorts of different ways that we infuse bias into a program. Bias can be infused based off of a relationship that you have with the creator, and you think this creator is going to make a lot of sense. Bias can be infused simply by the way you source a creator. I go to these 5 or 6 different places. I do a search. I look. I see what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. And then you have all of these infrastructural based things that are expensive, often at the agency level, that support bias in the decision-making process. You have really robust analytics that you can look at and you can start saying, well, I can connect a really interesting marketing story by telling the story through this lens. And through this lens, it equaled better engagement rate, or it equaled a more significant share of voice, or maybe we improved the customer value over here. So our whole mission when we founded RAD was, how do we remove as much bias as we can and provide the information in a manner that allows the marketing practitioner all of the power that they need in order to make better decisions, but also gives them the flexibility to still be marketing practitioners. So those two elements are very complex and need to work together. But the way we've developed our product and platform is to be consistent with the way marketing is done. And one consistent thing about marketing, whether it's influencer marketing, paid media, public relations, communications, anything, the consistency is there's no consistency across the board. Company X does it this way, company Y does it this way, marketing practitioner X does it here, somebody does it this way over here, and everybody kind of has their ways that they get to a certain objective. So our goal is to stay as neutral as possible and provide data-backed information that you can choose to utilize towards the activation of a campaign.
Got it. It's fascinating. Let's talk specifically about the creator economy. How does RAD assist brands in identifying and collaborating with creators?
Well, that's a good question. So the first thing that we dug into with our product and platform, I can give you a little bit of a backstory. We acquired a company in 2021 called Atomic Reach, which was an artificial intelligence company, and they had built some very sophisticated technology that was more focused on text-based outcomes, like think Persado or Jaspers of the world. And when we got into business together, we started looking at the problems that they were solving and the problems that RAD were solving. And we started talking about what we thought was a more expensive problem at the time, which was a real lack of sophistication in the influencer economy, that kind of stemmed from discovery at almost any level was completely broken. So how you actually find influencers was just completely peppered with bias from top to bottom. And you had all of these platforms that are out there. And I don't know if you've ever used any of the existing platforms, but if you search for an influencer, you get 500 influencers and maybe 3 or 4 of them kind of make sense. And then that doesn't really work. So you go into Google search and you find a couple people on some lists over here, and then you maybe have a couple relationships with some managers or some influencers. So it's just kind of this hodgepodge of ways that are, number one, filtered with bias, number two, don't really reflect any of the historical content patterns that should guide why you do engage or why you don't engage. So we said, well, how do we fix influencer discovery? And it's a very complicated, hard problem to solve because you have really extreme differences between all of these platforms and how they actually understand the historical content performance of each creator. And then each platform is also different with how they give you the information. So there's an industry that's been built on these sort of hacked solutions of scraping information in all these different areas in order to give you recommendations. And the result of that is really poor recommendations. So when we started trying to figure out how to fix this problem, what we realized is you can't start at the influencer discovery level because you're missing the biggest, most important component of your analysis with why you're going to find an influencer or why you're going to identify and then recommend an influencer. And that is understanding the audience and the motivations of that audience and why they would be mobilized to take an action. So we basically inverted the process to be backwards a little bit, meaning we created an audience insights product and platform within our technology that combs these different data sets to identify who your audience is and the things they care about most based off of your campaign objective. And by doing it that way, we were then able to go backwards and look at the historical content patterns of a big pool of different influencers from different platforms and find the outliers in those historical content patterns that would match to the audience insights, the topics, the categories, and the interests that weight most prominently for your campaign objective. The reason why that is important and innovative is it completely changes the way influencer discovery is done because it's now recommending influencers based off of the audience segment level versus just random influencer recommendations based off of some keyword searches, which we all know doesn't work. So that was really the way we changed how you find an influencer. It was by starting with the audience first.
Wow, that's fascinating. And can you give some sort of real world examples of perhaps creators that have been identified for brands through that approach? And maybe you don't need to use the exact names, but just kind of like something that gives more context to that example.
Yeah, so we have a men's vitality client, and it's a good question. And they came to us and they have this product that they wanted to release for men, and it's a vitality product. And their idea was the campaign's name was "He Still Got It." So it's really a campaign for me, I think. And it's insinuating that I didn't have it before, but now I still got it, and I got my libido and all these things. And they had all this money already invested into these big swag boxes, and they had all these things like, this is the audience we're going after, 45 to 55 years old men. And within the swag boxes, they had these these gifts that insinuated that the guy was single, that
Mm.
he still got it. 45-year-old you're going after is single, which just kind of was misaligned to begin with. So we said, let us look at our let us look at who your customer is today versus taking data that is potentially a little bit dated or doesn't really reflect the way the world feels today. And what we found through this analysis was their customer wasn't the 45-year-old guy. First of all, if it was, that guy is probably married, so he's not going to like a couple of the gifts that you have in here. The second part of that was it's this guy that is 28 to 33 years old. He's at the beginning of his entrepreneurial career or at the beginning of his career. He wants a little bit of an edge. He works out in the morning. He's single. And it's not he still got it. It's how do you have an edge into things that you're doing above and beyond what you would qualitatively say would be the reasons why you would take this supplement, right? And this is a big health company. So when we showed them that, because they had already gone down this road, you're now saying you're making these decisions over here with bias. And then the influencers that you thought were correct and the right people to serve this message over here, that's also biased and it's also incorrect. So you're fundamentally incorrect with how you're approaching the campaign at the strategy level. So before we go out and do all these things over here, let's change the strategy over here so you have a better opportunity to produce a more desirable outcome. In this context, their outcome was ROI, right? But if you have the wrong messaging and you're targeting the wrong person, you could just think the marketing messages weren't adequate or the influencers didn't do their job. There's all these different things. But if the strategy is wrong, it doesn't matter what you do over here because the strategy is incorrect. So that's a really good example.
And social media is always changing. Access to data is always changing. Language models are always evolving. How do you keep a pace of all of the different trends?
That's also you are equipped with good questions today. So the basis of everything that we've built here starts with ultimate flexibility with how we make decisions. And there is a intimate understanding of the differences between these platforms and why these platforms are used. The reason why somebody goes on Reddit is different than the reason why somebody is, tweeting on X, even if it's called a tweet today, is different than the reason why somebody does a TikTok post is different than somebody posting on Instagram. So there's nuanced differences between every single platform. That's the first thing. The second thing is you have to there's a you have to be willing to in infuse a lot of pain and suffering on yourself and the dev team and the product roadmap in order to do it right. And what I mean by that is you've got the API infrastructure. You have to work direct with these platforms to be able to use them compliantly, number one, and also to be able to utilize the data in a way that you can actually make a recommendation that you can stand behind. So at first, we started with Reddit at the very early stages when Reddit was started licensing their data. And then we started realizing that the value for us wasn't just we are looking at what's going on in Reddit as a proxy to the world, but it's also understanding what's going on X. It's also understanding these historical content performance patterns when somebody posts on TikTok or when somebody posts on Instagram. It's also understanding Google search. So we have all of these different feeds, which by nature de-risks the way we make recommendations because we're not overly dependent on one source of data. And that's why we are able to say we're kind of looking at the way things are happening today in order to make recommendations for what you should or shouldn't do. That's one of the flags that we stick in the ground when we're talking to a brand team because we're saying like, okay, this is great. You have this information. A lot of times the information they have about their brand is highly accurate. Sometimes we find some wrinkles in there and we expose them to them, but it's done in a way where they still control whether they decide to use it or not. So there's some sensitivity associated with that you have to be really careful with because you just don't know the dynamics when you're talking about, the information that people have when they're representing their own brand and how bought into that they are. And, if it's something that they've, kind of flagpole all the way up and down the organization. So you have to be really, really careful there. But from our perspective, it's having all of the different flexibilities associated with these different sources of data that we can utilize to make content recommendations And before we're making any content recommendations, it's really diving into the audience first to understand at the segment level what your audience cares most about before we're making any influencer recommendations or content recommendations based off of who the influencer is that's being engaged to promote your product.
And this is evolving quickly, but you've been doing it for a long time. What are some of the misconceptions about AI in marketing that you often encounter?
That's also that question in itself is also, I think, evolving very quickly
I'm sure.
because even 6 months ago, the talk track was, well, if you don't adopt AI now, then you're actually putting yourself at a disadvantage. And the successful practitioners are the people that figure out the different ways to utilize AI in order to make the thing that they're doing even better. That was the talk track 6 months ago. Now the talk track is a lot around de-risk, disclosure. Is it really not biased, or is your recommendation creating bias? So there's these other complex scenarios. So with every client that we have, what we found is there's also a different layer of adoption within that organization that is at a different stage. Some clients are at more advanced stages, and we are having more advanced conversations. Some clients are certainly at the beginning of the adoption curve. So you're ranging from conversations that are people within their marketing org that are typically further ahead than the rest of the organization that are championing, that are helping get people that aren't at their level, not meaning anything other than just a base understanding. So we're working with the adoption curve internally. That is everything from like simplistic lunch and learns, conversations about AI, how do we trust the data? What are our checks and balances we have in place to ensure that we're compliant, that we're not infusing bias, that it's fair recommendations. How are they using disclosures? How are the influencers using disclosures? But we do have a position, and our position is we leave the pen in the hand of the marketing practitioner, which ultimately represents the brand at the end of everything. And we're giving you information. And one of the things that we built into our technology was breadcrumbs. And
Mm.
breadcrumbs is exactly what it sounds, is there's this like black box nature of how information gets presented in the world of AI. And we've all experienced it if you've used it. Well, that sounds right, but how'd you get that? So at every step in the process, we've built into our product the ability for the marketer to look at the conversations that are actually happening on Reddit, or at the posts on TikTok, or at the tweets on X, and be able to see these conversations that show and validate why the AI is saying XYZ. So it's aggregating all of this information in an easy to look at way that helps you really say, okay, I believe this. At the content side of it, when influencers are pulled in, we isolate out the pieces of content that those influencers have produced that have outperformed their baseline metrics, that are consistent with the reason why we are recommending these influencers. An example of that is for a beauty client. A beauty client wants a really, really new lipstick to just hit the market and get a loud, loud, loud splash up market. There's not a conversion component, so it's more of a brand initiative. And in this context, there's lots of beauty influencers, but how do we find the beauty influencers that when they post about lipstick, their engagement rate really, really spikes above their benchmarks? So in that context, when we're making recommendations, you'll be able to see content specific to lipstick that outperforms these baseline metrics. So you're really clear that this is the right person for your campaign versus it's just a really good beauty influencer.
Yeah, I love that. And I can see how the breadcrumbs are really going to be valuable to the marketers. Let's take a step back. What are your thoughts on the future of influencer marketing?
We touched on this a little bit. My thoughts are the market has been shifting. I think it's going to continue to shift towards depth of content relationships, depth of influencer relationships, depth of brand partnership relationships. And what I mean by that is influencers are going to become more sophisticated with how they understand their audience. The better you are as an influencer, the more depth you have with your relationship with the advertiser, the more advertising dollars that advertiser will spend with you, the more authentic your audience will feel like you are being, because you are being authentic. These are all things that you cannot fake. And the influencers that understand the value of really, really treating their audience with the utmost respect and care, and really understand the things that they love and the things that they don't love. To me, those are the influencers that are going to continue to thrive. It's not about how big you are, it's about the quality of the information that you're putting into the marketplace. And the things that you're going to see, hopefully, less and less of are these one-off campaigns where you just know that it's a paycheck. So there's a lot of real intimate connection that we are really focused on building between the quality of the influencer connection with the brand. And then the other parts of this that we've already seen a lot of this out there in the marketplace is, influencers are getting so good and sophisticated at understanding their value that they're becoming brands themselves, and they're pushing out brands to market themselves, and they're doing it very successfully. So the days of having to be a celebrity in order to actually have your own brand or your own, alcohol brand or whatever it is, those days are changing now to influencers that understand commerce, that understand the value of their brand and continued implied endorsement if it's the right product. They're also able to build these really, really stable ongoing brands because the connection with the customer is established by the connection with the customer and the influencer, and that product that's put in front of them makes sense as a middle layer between that connection. So we see these areas as growth opportunities, but it sounds almost like, oh yeah, that makes sense. You think that influencers are going to make better content, therefore they're going to make better decisions and brands are going to like them more. But we really see that being where the market is going. And I say this because, like, if you think about how many pieces of content you consume a day, like how many pieces of information are put in front of you, it's like everybody's just like, from the second you wake up to the second you go to bed at night, there's like a competition, a worldwide competition for attention in all these different areas. So better content, better thumb stopping moments that are a natural moment between the brand and the influencer. These things naturally are going to continue to do better, but there's a science behind it, and there's a real science behind it. And the creators that we see that understand that science, that are taking a proactive measure to understand how AI can help them get an edge in that science, not necessarily AI is creating content for them, but more so how they can understand what type of content they should make. To us, that's where we're seeing not just a lot of growth, but a lot of opportunity. And there's already a shift. The good influencers, they're not just accidentally good. They're very, very fluent with their audience.
Got it. Makes absolute sense. And what advice would you give to marketeers who are hesitant to adopt AI-powered solutions?
What I still believe is in a very basic form. I say marketer. You could say marketers. You could also say people. You could also say educational environments. You can also say almost anything that you do in the world today has some sort of implied connection to artificial intelligence. And the key component, if you're a marketer, and what we've seen with marketers is really a shift from fear to understanding how to make themselves better. Uh, if you are a marketer today that is hesitant to adopt AI, I would say you're probably in the very, very last group of marketers for some reason, whatever it is. And I think that reason is probably a combination of just not taking the time to research and understand, and not taking the time to really get comfortable with the different ways that you can utilize artificial intelligence to make whatever it is you're doing even better. So the misconception that it's going to replace you is really a misconception. Think about things in the context of a really talented content creator becomes that much more impactful if they understand how to use a different combination of AI tools towards their end objective, which is potentially creating content for a specific industry or whatever. That person is going to have a different skill set. They're going to influence a different type of customer, and therefore they're going to have a different combination of tools that they use to produce outcomes. But what I'm trying to get to is Without AI, they maybe can do 5 pieces of really high quality content a month, 2 YouTube videos a month, and maybe a few posts that kind of get peppered as a result of that. With AI, they can literally triple their output and keep that same level of quality associated with their content. So the idea is, if you're really, really interested in producing more content that maintains that level that you want to keep it at in order to keep the integrity of your own personal brand, then using AI will help you do just that. Using AI is not going to take the place of you. You are only you. And that is the beautiful part of understanding AI. So that's as a content creator. As a marketer, the same thing holds true. You have a really, really good writer who's just unbelievably intelligent and writes these really, really high quality blogs. And these blogs are great. And the greatest, smartest people in the world, they read these blogs because they always learn. The problem is this person pushes out one piece of content a month. There's no reason why this person, without really anything other than just really diving into how to use the right set of tools for identifying topics of interest in different categories, writing meaningfully on those topics of categories. You can tell when it's a chat GPT thing, but you can also tell when it's a writer who really knows what he or she is doing and is taking these different tools in order to be able to produce more content. So there's an exact parallel. It's just you as the practitioner saying, I'm going to lean into learning what tools make most sense for me. And then I'm going to utilize those tools in order to produce more high quality content. But the only person that can decide if that quantity of content meets those standards is ultimately you. And then once you put it into the marketplace, your audiences are going to decide. If it's a brand, your brand's audience is going to say, yes, we like it, or no, we don't like it. If it's a creator, your followers or subscribers are going to continue to engage with you because they like it or they're not, right? One of the two. So there's these kind of barometers that are out there that tell you if you're doing a good job or not. But I think the danger um, is listening to some of these talk tracks out here, which we all know that are not true. It's going to replace you. It's going to take our jobs. I see less and less of that today, to be honest with you. Maybe it's because my circle is more of, hey, I've got a bunch of entrepreneurs and people like you around me. But I think that, there's people that are warming up to it that 6 months ago would have been, standing up and raising their hand and talking about how these things are going to, ruin creativity. I think it actually is a trigger and a stimulus for creativity.
Very wise words there. Well, thank you so much for your time. Before we wrap up, could you just cast your mind to the future? Where do you think we might be in 3 or 5 years' time?
In the creator economy, I'm going to assume that we're talking about the
Yes.
creator economy. What we are seeing is a combination of depth of relationships, as we discussed earlier, and brand safety becoming more and more at the forefront of the beginning stages of the conversation. So we see a future where uh, people are getting engaged with because they're the right person for the brand. And the brand has a different layer of comfort when engaging with these people because they're able to look at the historical digital footprints of everything they've done at the click of a button. And they know that it's safe because they're not putting out provocative content or controversial content, or these people are genuinely aligned with the brand's values, not because they're just getting a paycheck and they just shifted from X to Y over the last 3 months. So we see brand safety being a part of the beginning stages of these depth of relationships as they grow. And then in order to get to those things, there's things that need to happen on the way. I believe that as a creator, you're responsible for your brand the same way as a marketing practitioner, you're responsible for the brand, right? So there's these two kind of like parallel responsibilities. So if you understand that, and then you understand, well, there's a world where I can just go create content because I know what my audience likes. And there's also another world where I'm going to create content and I'm only going to push out content that I know my audience would like, but I'm going to take some steps over here to really have some data that supports my decisions. So I see a world where the sophistication with how creators decide on whether they're going to take a brand deal or not. I think that that is really important. I think arguably it's more important the things that you say no to than the things that you say yes to. And then I see a world that kind of stems off from that, which is really collaborating with the brand and creators being their own marketing engine, to where it's not just they're putting it out there, but they're working with the brand's team and in some cases educating them on why this is going to make more sense as it relates to who their audience or what their audience cares most about. So from our perspective, if these things happen, advertisers are spending more money, influencers are making more money, and creators are making more money. Why? Because advertisers are re-going with them because that relationship is authentic. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that the brands that are good at marketing have customers that love them. And there's instances where brands stray away from who their core is and they pay the price, right? So from our perspective, if a creator is making better content, the brand is happy, and then that kind of perpetuates into this really nice, healthy ecosystem that the end customer is really enjoying to see, which is this end piece of content that's put in front of them.
Very, very insightful. Well, I can't wait to see how it plays out. Jeremy, thank you so much for your time today. It's been great to hear insights from the business, and good luck with everything at RAD.
Appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be on, and super happy to chat with you this morning. Appreciate it, and thank you.